Hello, welcome to Divine Credence Official, and today we're going to be starting a new series discussing and analyzing over the fighting scenes in Divine Credence. So, with the fighting scenes, there are many attributes that go along with it. You have oplitos, you have sustain, you have the dermal, and then you obviously have each character's stamina. So the reason I'm going over this is because it's not really obvious that there's multiple layers when it comes to the fights. And if you don't have a good imagination and can't relay it back to the points that are given, especially if you haven't read any of the Lillimit classifications to tell you exactly what each thing does. So yeah, we're just going to be going over this just to be analyzing it as the series suggests. And so you can get a deeper understanding of how everything is going on in their world. So here we have the basic screen. So at the top we have the character's name. It goes from left to right. So we have Dia. So the first number you see up there is 290k. That's how many oplitos she has. So it takes oplitos to use magic. So every time they use magic, oplitos goes down. The higher efficiency the magic they're using is, the less oplitos it takes. The higher some magic uses an output range, such as Zoka's strength, which means that they can go for a maximum strength, and it'll take more oplitos than if they had more efficiency. Then it would take less oplitos. It will still take a lot, just a lot less. So after 290k, we have S1. So if you look at the bottom there, you see the legend. So we have oplitos, sustain, dermal, and pain tolerance. So at the top we have 290k, that's the oplitos. The S1 stands for stage 1, that's the sustain. So there's 4 different stages: stage 3, stage 2, stage 1, and ace. So stage 3 is the worst, ace is the best. So Dia has stage 1 sustain. Her dermal is stage 2, and her pain tolerance is a B. So how the pain tolerance is measured, we're going to go over it more in detail as the slide progresses. But it's just a general overview of their healthiness, their pain tolerance, their stamina, all of that combined into one. So A plus is the highest, and then F is the worst. So on the left side, you can look, we have a bit of a few words that are going to help explain. That's basically where our main focus is going to be on the left side. It's going to explain everything out. So we have character, the top is going to have their action, then it's going to have the effect or the outcome, and then any displacements that will happen. All right, so oplitos, energy, pretty much. Once depleted, so will the sustain and the dermal. So when the oplitos are gone, there's no more energy for the sustain or the dermal to function. So when someone uses all their oplitos, their sustain and dermal will break, and they can no longer use magic. So the sustain is the base magic health. Once depleted, so will all other stats, more than likely. So what this is saying is some characters might be using cast assist. So they're pretty much devices separate from the user. So what someone might do is, if they don't have a dermal, they can go and buy one. And then that standalone dermal doesn't really need them to have any magic at all, because it's its own power source. Now, some of them, they do use the sustain as a power source, but you'll understand whether or not, if it's like that, given the story will tell you. So, as you can see, the dermal is gone. When the dermal is gone, the sustain takes more damage. When the sustain is broken, oplitos pretty much become useless. So, when the sustain is broken, then you can't use magic. So all of the oplitos that are there pretty much become useless until their sustain regenerates to a certain capacity and allows them to turn back on. Then they get all their oplitos back and cast their dermal if they wanted to. So dermal. Buffer on top of the sustain. Negates most but not all damage to the sustain. So yeah, the dermal is pretty much armor that a character can use. It doesn't necessarily have to represent armor. It could be invisible if they want it to be. It could be a set of clothing, or it can be full out gear, or it could be a mecha suit. Whatever the character wants their dermal to be, it will be. But for the most part, most people just use a standard set of armor because physical armor does protect slightly more than invisible armor, and it gives your opponent and yourself something to go by. So if it was invisible, let's say you had a dagger or something on your arm. If it was invisible, your opponent wouldn't know it was there, but sometimes you could lose it too. And then, at that point, it's like, what's the point of having the dagger there if I can't even use it to protect myself? So now we have a Dia robot. We have a robot of Dia. So they have the same stats. So we're going to show what happens with to the sustain when a character has a dermal and doesn't have a dermal. So we look at on the left side, Dia with a dermal, equipped. Sustain takes less damage. Pain tolerance is affected less. That's the wrong affected. Dia robot without a dermal. Sustain takes the brunt of the damage. Pain tolerance is heavily affected. So if you can look at the legend, at the chart, before Dia had 100 on her sustain, 100 on her dermal, and 100 on pain tolerance. So did the Dia robot. So as you can see, Dia robot with no dermal, her sustain went from 100 to 85. Her pain tolerance went from 100 to 60. Dia with a dermal on the left, her sustain went from 100 to 95. Her dermal took a brunt of the force and went from 100 to 90. Her pain tolerance also went from 100 to 90. So this also assumes that the same stage dermal and sustain is equal between the two. So let's say if Dia robot sustain was ace, she probably would have went from to 92 or 93 instead of 85. Pain tolerance is a mix of pain tolerance, stamina, and capacity. Anytime a character is hit by anything in any way, their pain tolerance depletes. This behaves differently per character as the story suggests. So as you can see at the top, make sure that I put the pain tolerance at the end of their stats so you know that who's going to be taking the harder hits and who's not going to be feeling them like that. So the bottom left, the lower pain tolerance, the less effective the character's current state will be. So as you can see here, on the right, the Dia robot has 60 on her sustain. On the left, Dia has 90 on her sustain. So the lower the sustain gets, the more the individual's body feels the damage. So as you can see, when Dia robot gets hit, it goes from 60 to 50. It takes a lot more pain tolerance than Dia because her sustain was so high and her body didn't take that much of the damage. Without any context giving in the story, so the starting stats will be 95 and 100 on the rest. So 95% oplitals, 100 sustain, 100 dermal, and 100 pain tolerance. Balancers and dissipients and generals will be at 90% of their oplitals. This is because they're always using magic, and you would never know if a balancer just got on their job or not. So it's safe to assume that whenever a balancer is first introduced, it's 90%. Same goes for dissipients and generals, unless the story tells you otherwise. So oplitals and sustains are based off each character's own magic. So Dia's 95% is different than someone else's 95%. So what they're saying, someone else might have 450,000 oplitals. So it will say 450K at the top. So their 95%, although it's 95%, it's the same percentile as Dia, they will still have a lot more because this is a percentile. This also goes for the sustain and the dermal. And for the most part, you will base the pain tolerance off the grade they're given at the top. Alignment effectiveness. So if a character is using their own cast or personal cast, it will behave slightly different when interacting with other magic. For example, Kasai's stage 2 85 Dia, the Kori may not penetrate Dia's fire. However, Yoshido's, the Kori might penetrate through. So like you can see right here, And Dia, her fireball may go through the icicle. However, Yoshido's, the icicle might penetrate through his. But when both of them are shooting at each other, for fireball at each other, at stage 2, it equals out at the same output. So if, let's say, Yoshido gave 100 more oblatos into his fireball, it may go through. But if Dia's fireball had a lot less than Yoshido's, then of course her fireball will be canceled out. But at the same output, they will be equal to each other. So for now, this will be the standard chart, what it looks like until later when more characters are participating. But for now, this is the simplest way, and I will continue to use this.